Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to discover the betrayal was unfolding right under your roof? Tonight's story isn't just about suspicion. It's about cold, calculated patience and a revenge that cuts deeper than anger ever could. This is not just another tale of infidelity. It's a drama filled with whispers, evidence, and consequences that no one could escape. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Cheating Stories 7, because the twists here are only just beginning. So now let's step into the story. The silver frame, her betrayal, my calculated revenge. I do not wake to drama, I wake to water. Before dawn, the house holds its breath while the second shower runs behind a closed door. Steam slips under the frame and brings with it a citrus note we never buy. The air tastes like a hotel at noon. I set my hands to the kitchen counter to steady a thought that doesn't yet have a name. Her tote, careless, open, slouches beside the grinder. A travel receipt curls from the inner pocket like a finger beckoning. Deeper in the lining, a foil corner catches the weak light and flashes quick and guilty. We do not use protection. We have not for years. The truth arrives as quietly as a note slid under a door and sits there patient. I do not pound on wood. I do not inventory drawers. Anger wants lapse and volume. Habit offers me something else. I pour coffee, listen to the water stop, listen to towels move in a neat, practiced rhythm. The silver frame by the grinder throws a pale stripe across the counter. My smile inside that frame looks like it belongs to a former version of me, someone who thought routine was love's gentle cousin and not its rival. From the junk drawer, I take a spiral notebook and open it to a clean page. Dates, times, statements. I have always trusted the way facts, arranged properly, speak louder than outrage and stay calm while doing it. The pen bites at the paper. Tuesday, second shower before sunrise, citrus soap, travel receipt in tote, foil corner visible. I close the notebook halfway and set it beside the cup like a quiet witness. She breezes in with hair pinned and voice tuned to bright. Good morning, she sells, a smile that touches everywhere and nowhere. A kiss that lands like a memo. Meetings, regional push, might be late. A laugh for her screen, angled just so, the punchline protected by posture. I stir twice to give my hands honest work. When she notices the tote, she nudges it closed with the back of her hand. In the margin, I write one word, practiced. We eat the old way across a table that has hosted tax forms and birthday candles, ordinary paperwork and soft wishes. Paper towels, she asks. Yes, I say. Your day, she asks. Another server to rescue, I say. I listen for what is missing. No client anecdote. No gripe about slogans in the morning stand-up. No stray detail to snag on. Only sleek sentences engineered to slide toward the door without catching. I add a second note, scripts. Outside, Harbor Ridge wakes the way it always does. In this town, a porch light left on becomes a headline by lunch. Rumors run faster than mail. If I am careless, Murphy's will write my ending for me. So I outline something I can live with. Gather what is public, never trespass, verify patterns over weeks not days, speak to a lawyer before confiding in a friend, keep copies of anything with a date, a place, and a price. She leaves on soft feet, the door closing like a professional exit. I rinse our plates and set them to dry like evidence I don't yet know how to use. The tote waits on a chair, heavier for what I now know. I carry it to the bench by the door and feel that weight twist in my hand. Back at the counter, I add 3 lines. Thursday, late Thursday, hotel points redeemed in March. My work bag, scuffed, loyal, rests by the back door. I pack the usual tools and one new thing, the calm to stay inside the outline. Sun pushes over the ridge. Shadows climb down the hallway wall. In the mirror, my face looks ordinary and alert. If I accuse her now, I will be arguing with fog. I want a truth that can stand in sunlight. Work is a bomb of solvable problems. Someone locked an account. Someone unplugged a switch and swore the internet died. I reset, replug, reassure. Between tickets, I grow the list. Fuel receipts, toll timestamps, garage entries, restaurant charges that don't match her texts. I am not hunting scandal. I am hunting alignment. Truth is what remains when stories stop cooperating. At lunch, I park by the marina where gulls argue like old men and the wind smells like iron. I call the bank and request paper statements. I email myself a subject line, timeline, and paste the morning notes into simple blocks. Mid-afternoon, she texts, late meeting, maybe 9. I reply with one word, understood. The restraint is deliberate. By the time I drive home, the sky has the faded color of paper that slept too long in a drawer. The house greets me with honest creaks. The tote sits where I left it, exactly where I left it. I turn the silver frame inward by half an inch. The smallest honesty makes a room feel straighter. I open the notebook and write a final line, act with patience, not theater. Let time be your witness. Morning comes again and repetition clarifies. The second shower returns like a bad rerun trying to look new. I set out cups without clatter. She talks in bright blocks that stack but never join. On the back of an envelope, I map her calendar claims against the world's clocks. What she says at 6:10, what a toll camera says at 6:13, what a card terminal prints at 6:27, 2 exits from the interstate. I do not need a confession if I can build a chronology. I remember my father's advice about crooked shelves. Do not push the wood, plumb the wall. I stop pushing. I plumb. And when she reaches for the tote again, closing it with the same soft backhand, I see it not as a gesture, but as a line item, evidence of habit. The pen waits. I write, pattern forming. That night I test myself against noise, silence in place of spectacle. I take the frame from its spot by the grinder. I do not smash glass. I wipe fingerprints with the edge of a dish towel, the way you clean a lens before you take a careful shot. Behind the photograph, between cardboard and faith, I slide a single index card and write a sentence so small it almost escapes. No theatrics, only consequences. The drawer closes, the kitchen exhales. Somewhere the tide changes without asking for an audience. I sleep enough to dream a room with windows open. In the dream, the air smells like salt and lemon, not lies. When I wake, the house is ordinary again, and I realize ordinary is the prize. I dress for work, tuck the notebook into the bag, and step into a day I can explain out loud. The town does not roar, it murmurs. Harbor Ridge sits by the sea, a place so small that one porch light left on past midnight becomes tomorrow's gossip. Ethan has always known this rhythm, but now he listens differently. He moves through the hardware store, where the old bell clatters above every purchase, and through Murphy's bar, where the sound of glasses carries faster than any newspaper. Tommy Hale leans on the counter like a priest at confession, collecting stories people don't realize they are telling. Ethan lets them wash over him. Lies reveal themselves best against the hum of ordinary truth. Dana's calendar begins to tilt. A late client dinner, a regional training, a site visit 2 towns over. Each excuse wears the polish of professionalism, even admiration. Taken alone, each is plausible. Stacked together, they form a second skin, too neat, too practiced. Ethan resists the urge to accuse. He turns instead to the discipline that has steadied him his whole life. Method, not impulse. Credit card bills, toll logs, fuel receipts, public records that do not know how to lie. He sees gas purchased 30 miles away at the very hour she said she was still buried at the office. He sees a parking garage entry in a city she never mentioned. He doesn't dramatize. He doesn't storm. He writes it down, marking ground with the precision of a surveyor. Receipts, emails, charges, they begin to hum in chorus. A dinner she claimed she skipped is coded on the bill. A hospitality charge hides a motel. Corporate disguise, yes, but to Ethan's sharpened eye it glows like neon. He buys a binder, fills it with tabbed folders, and on the front writes a single word in steady ink, truth. She comes home late, exhaustion painted on her face, the kind that comes not from work but from carrying lies. She showers again at hours that make no sense, scrubbing at what she thinks can't be seen. Ethan notes the timing. At the table he listens, watching the silence behind her chatter. He does not confront her. He does not break the script. He lets the record keep growing. At Murphy's, Tommy pours him a beer and mentions seeing Cole Hartman, Dana's co-worker, slip in twice that week during work hours. Tommy says it casually, without malice, just the chatter of a bartender who measures life in shifts and regulars. Ethan shrugs, sips and files it under background noise. Not proof, not yet. Back home, he slides the binder into the drawer beneath the silver frame, that quiet witness from the kitchen counter. Closing the drawer, he feels calm, not the calm of forgiveness, but the calm of preparation. The town may whisper, but whispers fade. The truth, arranged properly and without theater, will last. Patterns do not shout. They whisper until someone patient enough begins to map them. Ethan has always been that kind of man. The boy who charted bus arrivals to prove timetables were lies dressed as promises. The student who recorded weather reports just to measure how often forecasters missed. Now that quiet obsession turns toward the woman who sleeps beside him. Dana's calendar is his starting point. She logs meetings and overnight trainings with the precision of someone desperate to be believed. At first, the entries look convincing, but when Ethan cross-references them with public information, hairline fractures appear. A regional training on Tuesday ends at 1:45 p.m. By 1:52, the toll camera has already captured her sedan leaving the freeway, heading away from downtown. At 2:19, her corporate card pings at a roadside motel 2 exits past the toll booth. The math does not forgive her. He doesn't touch her phone. Boundaries matter. Instead, he confines himself to records they legally share: bank statements, toll accounts, parking stubs, conference schedules. Each source is admissible. Each line carries more weight than words ever could. On his corkboard, blue pins mark her claims. Red pins mark what the world recorded. Slowly, the board fills into a shape that is both obvious and unbearable. 2 red lines every week, one Tuesday, one Thursday, leading always to the same cluster of budget motels along the interstate. The map says what Dana never will: near predictable hours. A 30-minute drive. A ritual repeated until it carves itself into stone. To anyone else it would look like noise. To Ethan it is a pattern singing its truth. He rehearses the conversation he hasn't allowed himself to start. What will she say to time itself? Can she argue with toll booths, receipts, parking garage cameras? Lies duel with people, they collapse before timestamps. At work he hears colleagues repeat Dana's cover stories: regional pressure, late clients, endless quotas. He nods, listening as though he believes them, while his pen scratches notes on the back of envelopes. Noise to them, clarity to him. One Tuesday, she claims a stay at the downtown Hilton for training. Ethan pulls their joint credit statement and circles the entry. Not the Hilton, not downtown. Harbor Motor Lodge, a place that charges by the hour. He writes in red ink across the margin: not training, not downtown. Then he adds a rule across the top of the page: no theatrics, only consequences. At night, the corkboard glows under a desk lamp. Blue pins wilt like paper. Red pins march across the board in merciless symmetry. Beside it, the silver frame lies face down in the drawer, waiting. The evidence grows louder without sound. He tells himself he is not chasing scandal. He is building something steadier, truth layered carefully enough to survive denial. A record that needs no raised voice. One day it will speak without him. The wind off the bay has a hard edge. Flags snap against their poles, metal ropes clanging like alarm bells that no one else hears. Ethan parks at the far edge of the harbor in Lot, a cracked strip of asphalt where grass fights to grow. He kills the engine, leaves the windows rolled up, and becomes a man with nothing urgent to announce. His camera does not trespass. He photographs only public things. The marquee out front with its crooked plastic letters spelling the date. The row numbers stenciled in flaking paint. The vacancy sign taped in the corner of the office window. The dashboard clock at the exact second each frame is taken. He braces his wrist on the steering wheel, steady as if diagramming a network at work. These pictures will argue for him later when words would only invite denial. He does not step closer. He does not peer through curtains. He waits like any man killing time, anonymous in the weather. A maid cart rattles by, its bag swelling with sheets. A gull fights with a trash can. Traffic hums from the freeway and merges with his pulse until both beat the same. The numbers along the corridor, 10, 12, 14, 16. His lens settles, casual but unblinking, on the door marked 14. He feels the same stillness he felt the first time he opened the notebook, like slipping behind glass while the scene carries on without him. A door creaks somewhere out of sight. A couple crosses the lot, heads bent over phones, faces lit by screens instead of daylight. Then the handle of 14 turns. Dana steps into the light with the gestures of rehearsal. Left palm smoothing her hair from crown to ends, the ritual she uses before boardrooms and photographs. Behind her, Cole Hartman laughs at something private, his smile the same one he used at Christmas parties when he gripped Ethan's hand too tight and talked too loudly about market share. They scan in opposite directions, practiced as dancers. Then they split, 2 cars, 2 exits, 2 stories that will never meet. Ethan's shutter clicks 3 times, door open. Dana smoothing her hair, Cole laughing. Each frame captures more than faces, the flaking paint of the row numbers, the cracked curb, the harsh daylight cutting shadows into hard shapes. He doesn't chase a better angle. He lets the world do the talking. When the door of 14 shuts again, he lowers the camera. A sticky note on the dashboard receives the time in his neat script. He photographs the note beside the odometer. He photographs the motel sign again, the way a mathematician double-checks an equation. Then he pulls out of the lot slow and calm, stops at a gas station 2 blocks away, and buys coffee he does not drink so the receipt will timestamp his presence. At home, the house greets him with its ordinary creaks. He lays the prints on his desk, gray shapes like weather approaching from the horizon. 4 images he keeps, printed matte, margins annotated in blue ink with times. He slides them behind the silver frame, not trophies, not weapons, but anchors. The paper itches at his fingertips. Rage rises like static, then flattens beneath old habits of restraint. He imagines the version of himself who might have stormed the corridor, heart pounding in his fists. That version would have one sound and lost everything else. He breathes until the image fades. There are ways to end a marriage that create no new crimes, ways to protect yourself without turning pain into spectacle. In the quiet of his study, he hears Rowena Pike's voice already forming, though he has not met her yet. Lawyers write facts, not feelings. Witnesses sign their names, not their sympathies. If this story is to be told, it must be told in documents. He opens the notebook and begins a new page. Harbor Inn. He numbers the photographs, cross-references them with the gas station receipt, adds 2 previous Thursdays and the toll timestamps that frame them, draws a thin line connecting the pins in his mind. At the bottom margin he writes again, underlined twice, no theatrics, only consequences. The photographs sit behind the silver frame, their edges pressing like a hidden pulse. Ethan knows they are enough to collapse the story Dana rehearses each night, but paper without process is still fragile. He needs more than outrage. He needs leverage that will survive scrutiny. Rowena Pike's office smells faintly of leather and copier toner. Shelves line the wall, binders stacked like quiet jurors. Employment law, civil procedure, family code. Ethan sits across from her, his manila folder neat, his photographs unopened but present. He explains plainly the second showers, the receipts, the motel door. He does not raise his voice. He lets the record speak. Rowena listens without interruption. When he stops, she draws 3 columns on her legal pad. What you know, she says, pointing to the left. What you can prove, she continues, marking the center. And what a judge will care about, she finishes, tapping the right. Her pen slides under the word patterns and she underlines it twice. She circles financial misuse in the second column, then meets his eyes. Infidelity is messy, documentation is clean. If you want leverage, don't build it out of adjectives, build it out of records. Ethan nods, this is why he came. Rowena leans back, hands folded. Company fraternization policies aren't moral judgments, they're risk controls. If you alert HR, attach only the records, you're entitled to nothing more. Let the patterns do the speaking. In his mind, he sees the corkboard in his study, blue pins for Dana's words, red pins for the world's facts. He can already imagine how neatly those columns will align. That night, he stands in front of the bathroom mirror. The razor scrapes away stubble, leaving skin pale, ordinary, unremarkable. He stares into eyes that no longer search for explanations. Behind them, something has sharpened. The mirror reflects not a husband waiting for a confession, but a man preparing a future he can defend without shame. He thinks of his niece, the child who sometimes asked why Aunt Dana never showed up at soccer games. Years from now, when she asks again, he wants to answer without flinching. He wants to explain this season like arithmetic, no melodrama, just numbers that add up. He lays his notes across the dining table, trimming them down. No speculation. No theories, just receipts, timestamps, and correlations, a lab report of betrayal, detached and precise. The coldness steadies him. From the closet, he pulls their prenuptial agreement, a document once dismissed as formality. He flips pages until a clause catches the light, marital misconduct tied to commingled funds. Dana had laughed when they signed it, champagne in hand. Now the fine print feels like armor. He highlights the section, clips it into the folder, and adds every dollar traced to motel bills, dinners disguised as client meetings, fuel that carried her out of town. He runs his pen down the column, every line exact, every charge accounted for. The evidence no longer feels like suspicion, it feels like arithmetic. Later, back at the mirror, he studies his reflection once more. No pity, no waiting, only endurance. The man in the glass has chosen patience over theater, clarity over noise. He whispers the rule written across his notes, no theatrics, only consequences. The mirror returns it like a vow. The packet does not look like much. A manila envelope, a black binder clip, plain paper stacked without ornament. Its power lies in its refusal to speak louder than necessary. On top rests a single cover page, Ethan's handwriting steady and spare. Please find attached a factual timeline compiled from records jointly held and public sources. These materials raise potential conflicts with company policy regarding fraternization and use of company time. I submit them for review. No adjectives, no accusations, just a signature and a phone number, contact, not theater. Beneath it, the timeline. Dates in the left column, verifiable events in the right, fuel receipts, toll timestamps, parking charges, corporate calendar entries, hospitality codes that resolve not to downtown hotels but to roadside motor inns, each entry numbered, each footnoted with its source. The appendix follows, scans, headers, screenshots, photographs of clocks and signs. No private texts, no faces. The restraint is the point. Ethan reads it through once more, pulling out any line that sounds like a stab. He leaves only sentences that hold in court. Then he slides the stack into the envelope, addresses it to Human Resources, Atnan, Compliance, and drives to the post office. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. The clerk peels a sticker, smooths it with her thumb, and stamps the receipt. Certified mail, return requested. The printer coughs out the tracking number. Ethan writes it into his notebook and photographs it beside the wall clock, as precise as any ledger. Outside, the air tastes of iron. He walks the waterfront deliberately, past fishermen swearing at gulls who have learned to unzip coolers with their beaks. The tide slaps the pilings in a rhythm both tired and eternal. He lets his steps fall into sync, the static in his chest thinning at last. He calls no one. He lets the town keep its whispers while he keeps his records. Back home, the organization continues. Drives cloned, folders labeled by date, statements exported twice, cloud and external. His paycheck moved to an account in his name alone, the supplementary card closed with polite efficiency. Passwords changed. Two-factor added. A yellow pad divided into 3 boxes, money, logins, paper, done written in block letters beside each when finished. The silver frame moves from the kitchen to his study, set on the desk beside the corkboard. Its face turned inward, holding not a smiling couple but silence. Beneath it, the certified mail receipt rests like a shim. At Murphy's, he says nothing. When someone asks about his week, he answers simply, "Work is work." People in Harbor Ridge can hear the size of the thing you are not saying. He gives them nothing to carry. The call that matters does not come to him. It lands on a desk with frosted glass and policy binders. It travels in a conference room, inside an email marked confidential. It arrives not as scandal, but as a question. Does this violate company policy? Somewhere, inevitably, it finds Cole Hartman's name. Somewhere, a manager practices a neutral face. Ethan does not need to script any of it. He has not mailed a threat. He has mailed a process. The difference is everything. That night, he cooks a plain meal and eats at the table where lies once filled the silence. He checks his backups again, folds the yellow pad, and slides it beneath the notebook. In the hallway mirror, he pauses, not to admire, not to condemn, only to acknowledge the man who has chosen documentation over drama. The house creaks honestly around him. He turns off the lamp. For the first time in weeks, he sleeps 4 hours without interruption, not because the storm is over, but because it has finally begun to move in the right direction. Blue Harbor Cafe smells of cinnamon and damp coats, the kind of scent that softens a room while sharpening nerves. Ethan chooses the booth by the window, neutral ground. The street outside hums with traffic, steady enough to make silence feel private. He sets a thin copy of his timeline on the table, dates on the left, sources on the right, but does not slide it forward. Jenny Park arrives with the posture of someone already carrying an apology. Her tote lands beside her. Her hands fold around the paper cup as if heat might decide for her. She does not touch the folder. She looks at him and then away, as though words are too heavy to balance with eye contact. Ethan says her name once softly. He tells her he does not think in villains. Dana is not a monster to him, just a person who has made choices again and again. "I want truth," he says, "not tactics." Jenny's eyes glisten the way secrets do when they have lived too long inside. Her first words stumble out like stones across water. "I thought it would fade. I thought it was a phase. Then I didn't want to get involved. I wasn't sure what was mine to say." Ethan does not fill her pauses. He promises he will not use her name in anything. He asks only for facts, times, places, receipts, a record that will not collapse. Her breath breaks. The smallest lies arrive first. Girls' nights that were really hour blocks wrapped around motel check-ins, networking drinks that were cover for drives to the interstate, borrowed blouses and borrowed alibis. Twice, Jenny admits she had texted Ethan from Dana's phone. "Traffic is bad, dinner is long, go ahead without me." The words tremble out of her. She looks ashamed, not only for the cover, but for how easily it came. Ethan keeps his pen steady. He asks for dates, not explanations. A Tuesday in late March. A Thursday 2 weeks later. The Friday Dana claimed an off-site. Jenny names the restaurant, the corner table where they posed for a staged photo. She remembers how Dana's voice dipped when she said Cole's name on speaker, lowering the volume as though volume could lower risk. Ethan writes it all down, numbers, hours, places, fitting them into his existing pins. Jenny admits the cover stories grew like furniture, one piece borrowed from work, one from weather, one from an inside joke. She says she hated herself for being good at it. The first time felt like rescue, the fifth felt like conspiracy. She stares out the window as if the street might forgive her before Ethan does. He does not ask why. Why belongs to arguments, not records. He asks only if any expense touched a joint card. Jenny nods, naming a weekday lunch labeled client-facing but charged to the household account. Ethan underlines the entry, moves on. When her words run out, he closes his pen and says thank you. He means it. He asks only one favor, no more cover. No small lies, no big ones, no half answers meant to protect feelings at the cost of truth. Jenny nods quickly, then slower, adjusting to the new gravity. "I'll stop," she says. "I should have stopped before." Ethan tells her he understands how friendship can look like rescue until it turns into conspiracy. Understanding does not absolve, it names the slope. They do not hug, they do not promise to stay in touch. At the door, she hesitates. "You're not going to ruin her?" she asks, last flicker of old loyalty. Ethan shakes his head. "I'm going to write things down. The answer is both boundary and truth. He leaves a bill on the counter for a black coffee he does not drink, buying it for the next customer instead. A small gesture, proof that he has not let betrayal bleach out generosity. Outside, the sky is the pale gray of paper. He walks to his car, calm, weight distributed correctly for the first time in weeks. Back home, he files Jenny's dates under third-party corroboration. The corkboard accepts the new pins without ceremony, patterns tightening until they hum like a chord that no one can unhear. At the bottom of his notes, he writes one more line, same as always, no theatrics, only consequences. That night, Dana comes in late. She smells of hotel soap beneath the citrus wash. She asks about dinner. He says he has eaten. She says she is exhausted. He says he believes her. No judgment, no script. In the study, the silver frame lies inward, the certified mail receipt pressed beneath it like a brace. Ethan slides the cafe napkin into the folder, turns off the lamp, and lets the house creak back to its original shape. Patterns hum. Truth waits. He will too. Cole Hartman's swagger had always thrived in half-light, bars, hotel corridors, Christmas parties where charm passed for substance. But fluorescent bulbs are merciless. In the office, beneath ceiling panels and binders marked compliance, his shine dulls to something brittle. The investigation does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives in calendar invites, in neutral emails requesting clarification, in binders flipped open to bookmarked policies. Managers read guidelines they once skimmed. HR officers sharpen their pens. Conflict of interest, reputational harm, misuse of company funds, words cold enough to sand down any smile. Dana is called into a glass-walled room where everything looks transparent, whether it is or not. She faces two HR officers and her manager, all with voices measured, all with notes prepared. No one accuses. Everyone inquires. Did she travel for work on these dates? Did her schedule overlap with Cole's? Who approved the expenses? She answers, but each word sounds thinner than the one before. Sympathy does not vanish, but it retreats. Colleagues hover near her desk with half-smiles, kindness clipped short by caution. Conversations stop when she enters a room. She types emails with fingers that shake, aware that every keystroke could be observed. The air in the office feels charged, brittle, sharp enough to cut. Ethan hears none of this directly. His pipeline is slower but steadier, the quiet churn of process. A packet in an inbox, a file in a compliance binder, a shift in a project roster. He continues to live plainly. At work, he replaces a server fan that squeals itself to death. At home, he fixes a neighbor's ladder, returns it polished clean. These small tasks balance him against the storm he knows is gathering elsewhere. That evening, he removes his wedding ring. Not with anger, not with ceremony, simply with the same patience he uses to return a screw to its rightful thread. He sets the ring in a dish beside the silver frame on his desk. The frame still faces inward, its hidden photographs pressing like a steady heartbeat. When Dana comes home, her hug lingers longer than usual. Not affection, something closer to inquiry. A question she cannot bring herself to ask. Her arms hold tight, waiting for reassurance he will not give. Ethan receives it without stiffening, but without returning it either. He cooks dinner, the kind he once reserved for anniversaries. Herbed chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine opened not to celebrate but to sustain. He eats his plate alone, leaves hers covered on the counter. Each bite tastes of memory and reclamation. Silence stretches, not as punishment but as proof that lies no longer have purchase here. The house creaks honestly. Dana moves with careful footsteps, purse set down gently, shower too quick, her presence lingering in doorways like someone waiting for permission. Ethan lets the silence answer for him. Some truths do not arrive in words, they arrive in the absence of them. In his study, the corkboard waits, pins aligned in merciless geometry. The dish with the ring catches lamplight. Ethan writes one line in his notebook, square and deliberate. Policy begins its work. I will not rush it. Some objects pretend to be decorations when in truth they are promises. On a Saturday washed in slow sunlight, Ethan takes down the silver wedding frame from its usual place in the kitchen. He does not smash it. He does not curse at it. He wipes the glass with the edge of a dish towel the way you clean a lens before taking a careful shot. The refrigerator hums, the eaves breathe faint wind. Ordinary sounds become witnesses. On his desk, a neat stack waits, the printed timeline, the pins and dates and tidy lines. He opens the frame's backing and slides out the photograph, the smiling couple preserved by good lighting and misplaced certainty. In its place, he inserts the record, aligning corners with deliberate care. The click of the tabs closing sounds like a decision. He sets the frame face down in the drawer. If Dana ever opens it, she will not find memory. She will find arithmetic. He prints 2 letters, one addressed to his parents, one to hers. The tone is steady, careful, almost clinical. We are separating. Here is the process as it stands. We intend to be courteous. Please avoid speculation, direct questions to counsel. He includes Rowena Pike's contact information. The letters read like minutes from a meeting no one wished to attend, but that everyone deserved to understand. At the post office, fluorescent lights buzz over a slow line. Envelopes shuffle forward like small boats in current. The clerk stamps green cards, peels labels, slides them across the counter. Certified mail. Sign here. Ethan copies the tracking numbers into his notebook and photographs them beneath the wall clock, ritual precision anchoring an unwanted errand. Back home, he files the receipts under a new tab labeled Parents. He adds a note to the day's entry, informed without humiliating, precise without cruelty. The distinction matters more than he expected. He brews coffee not from need but from steadiness, steam curling above the mug like a signature in air. Toward evening, he walks past Murphy's and keeps going. Through the bar window, he sees Tommy leaning into a laugh, glasses lifted in choreography that belongs to another rhythm of life. Ethan does not step inside. He follows the longer path to the waterfront. Rust streaks down pilings like vertical sunsets. The tide licks at stone with patient inevitability. Fishermen curse gulls, gulls curse back. The wind smells of iron and elsewhere. In his study, he cracks the window. Salt air stirs the papers, lifts their corners, lets them fall again. The corkboard holds steady, blue pins for claims, red pins for the world's records. Beside it, the dish with his ring. The frame lies inward, concealing its new contents. He opens a fresh page in his notebook and writes a header in square, deliberate letters after. Under it, a list grows. Passwords, update, audit, secure. Pantry, clear duplicates, restock with real food. Paint, choose a shade that looks like daylight and commit. Utilities, names corrected on the right bills. Insurance, beneficiary check. Keys, duplicates where they belong, not where habit left them. Subscriptions, cancel noise. He draws boxes beside each and leaves them empty, promises waiting to be honored. He starts small. He carries a trash bag to the pantry and clears jars that expired in another season of life. He lines up grains, oils, coffee filters. He tapes 3 paint chips to the wall by the window, waits to see how the light decides among them. He does not check his phone. He does not scroll for whispers. If people are talking, they will keep at it whether he listens or not. Truth requires fewer witnesses than spectacle. In the kitchen, he rinses the coffee cup and sets it upside down to dry. One more small thing finished. The letters are already in motion, heading toward front doors and doorbells. Toward size and phone calls he may let roll to voicemail. He has decided what shape this ending will take. The frame in the drawer is its symbol and its guardrail. Before bed, he ticks 1 box, passwords, and draws a thin line through pantry, first pass. At the bottom margin, he writes a reminder, not a rule. Build the life you can explain. The house answers with honest creaks. He turns off the lamp. In the dark, the curtain lifts and falls with the night air, a slow pulse that sounds like tomorrow. The call comes at sunrise, that fragile hour when the harbor light hovers between gray and gold. Ethan stands at the kitchen window, phone pressed to his ear, the tide clock ticking steady on the wall. Dana's parents speak together the way long marriages do. One begins, the other completes. Their voices carry a mix of shock, grief, and the desperate instinct to defend not the lies but their daughter's capacity to be more than her worst month. They ask if he hates her. Ethan answers without hesitation. No, I hate the lying. The difference lands heavier than any accusation. He repeats the plan he has already written so many times it feels memorized. No public scenes, no gossip, documents not stories, decisions not theater, mediation if possible, litigation if necessary. He will not accept rewritten math. They pause, confused. He explains gently, charges labeled hospitality but mapping to motels, dinners coded client-facing but charged to a joint card, fuel expenses contradicting calendars. I'm not assigning motives, he says. I'm reconciling ledgers. On the other end of the line, silence gives way to recognition. Before they hang up, Dana's mother whispers, almost pleading, please don't ruin her. Ethan closes his eyes. I won't, he says, but I won't cover her either. He writes the time of the call in his notebook and underlines one word, courteous. Then he makes coffee he doesn't need, watching steam rise like punctuation in the stillness. The silver frame lies in the drawer, pressing its quiet weight against the hidden timeline. At noon, Dana arrives, red-eyed, clutching a folder fat with counter-narratives. She stands in the doorway like someone who wants a truce but has not found the language. Ethan offers water. She declines and opens her folder, printouts in neon highlighter, screenshots, calendar blocks shaded like a child's map. She begins with a story about a client dinner that ran late. Ethan nods, then slides across a receipt, timestamp, bar 2 exits from the motel strip. His voice stays level. I'm not here to trap you. I'm here to balance accounts. She tries again. He counters again, story against record, memory against arithmetic. Each time, his evidence holds. Somewhere in the exchange, a piece of her anger gutters out like a candle. Her shoulders sink. I was lonely, she says at last, voice thin. Loneliness, Ethan answers, is not a line item. For a moment they sit in the still air of that sentence. Then he opens their prenup to the clause on marital misconduct and misuse of joint funds. He explains calmly he is not digging through everything, not demanding punishment. Only reimbursement for expenses that never belonged to both of them. Motel bills on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 dinners dressed as business, fuel receipts that contradicted her texts, a boutique charge that never arrived at their home. He slides a shortened list across the table. I'm not asking for explanations, I'm asking for repayment. She studies the list for a long time. Finally, she asks, is there any way to fix this? You can stop lying today, he says. The words bridge the space between them like a plank across water. She nods once, not a promise, not nothing. They discuss logistics, mediation dates, a neutral public statement we separated. We wish each other well, no autopsy in public. She agrees in principle, flinching at the word public as though the town's eyes already press at the windows. Ethan doesn't mention the certified letters already in motion. He doesn't mention the packet already in HR's hands. He keeps the conversation on the ground in front of them. At one point, she reaches for the spot on the counter where the silver frame used to stand. Her hand finds only bare wood. Where is it? She asks, voice small. In the study, he says, nothing more. When she leaves, folder clutched like armor, she turns at the door. I was going to say I'm sorry, she whispers, but I think I said it too late. Ethan answers with courtesy, not absolution. Thank you for coming. The door clicks shut. The house exhales, honest in its creaks. Ethan writes 4 lines in his notebook, call with parents respectful. Reimbursement pending. Mediation proposed. No theatrics, only consequences. In the study, he cracks the window. The air moves through, lifting the edge of the after list on his desk. The paint chip taped to the wall warms under late light, as if the room itself has agreed to meet him halfway. Friday in Harbor Ridge carries its own restlessness. Doors slam quicker. Streetlights buzz louder. Gossip finds new wings. Ethan pushes open the door of Murphy's, not to perform, not to announce, but to exist for one evening among noise. The place smells of fried food and varnish, the old perfume of small-town survival. He orders water first, beer second, easing his body into the rhythm of the room. A few heads turn. Conversations dip, then recover. This is Harbor Ridge etiquette. Look but don't stare, save questions for kitchens and backyards. Tommy wipes the counter with his rag, nods once, then slides down to the other end, giving Ethan space to choose his night's shape. Ethan keeps his elbows square on the wood, glass steady in his hand. 20 minutes later, Cole Hartman breezes in, swagger clinging like smoke from a fire not quite out. He laughs too loud near the jukebox, claps a shoulder too hard, repeats a joke until it falls flat. Words drift across the room, policy, final warning, compliance. Cole smothers them with grin and bravado. His eyes pass over Ethan once. Then again, slower, gauging whether the floorboard beneath him will hold. He drifts closer, lands a cheap joke at another man's expense, comparing marriage to a scoreboard, points for betrayal. Laughter dies in throats. The air cools. Ethan doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't rehearse lines. He says 2 sentences, even and plain. This isn't a game, I have the paperwork. The words drop like notarized stamps. No volume, no theater, just wait. Someone near the pool table, too curious to resist, asks if it's true. Ethan answers without flourish. What's true is in the timeline. He doesn't pull it out, doesn't wave evidence like a trophy. The refusal is its own authority. Cole's smile cracks. His eyes search for rescue in laughter and allegiance, in anything that will hold him. None comes. Silence settles not as victory, but as relief. Relief that no one must pretend anymore. Cole mutters something low, not brave enough to repeat, and heads for the door. It bangs once against the frame, then closes, leaving behind a room that exhales together. Conversations resume, softer, steadier. Tommy returns, rag in hand, wiping the counter like erasing chalk lines from a board. Ethan thanks him. Tommy answers with a single nod, carrying the weight of the room's understanding. Ethan finishes his beer unhurried, leaves money on the counter, enough for his drink and someone else's, and steps into the night. The streets hum with their usual mix of gossip and routine, but no one stops him. The spectacle tonight was that there had been no spectacle. Just truth set down quietly where swagger once tried to live. Under the streetlights that buzz like insects, Ethan walks home. The house greets him with honest creaks. In his study, the silver frame lies inward, the timeline hidden beneath glass. He writes one more line before bed. No theatrics, only consequences, even here. Mediation looks like a room no one chooses on purpose. Neutral art that offends no one, chairs too sturdy to creak, pens lined in a careful triangle beside a bowl of untouched mints. The air itself feels pre-measured. MS. Ames, the mediator, begins with ground rules in a voice that has shepherded storms before. Confidentiality. One person speaks at a time. Park emotion, pick up fact. Ethan nods. Dana nods. The clock on the wall ticks with a slow, deliberate hand. Rowena Pike sits at Ethan's side, presence steady but without heat. Across the table, Dana's counsel perches with glasses low on his nose and notes stacked like shields. Opening remarks, Ethan keeps his brief. Clean division, repayment of misused funds, no character assassinations. He adds one clause that matters more than he expected: digital boundaries. No access to devices, no sharing passwords, no logging into accounts. Not punishment, just a wall where there needs to be one. Dana's hands tremble, but her face does not. She says she wants fairness, admits mistakes, but resists being painted as a villain. Ethan answers evenly, I'm not painting, I'm totaling. He slides a short list across the table, motels coded as hospitality, 2 dinners falsely labeled client-facing, fuel charges that contradict calendars, numbers only. The mediator nods, seeing arithmetic where others might see accusation. The first paper signed is not a settlement but a mediation agreement. Confidentiality, today's date, intent to resolve. Dana signs with a trembling hand that still keeps its posture. The mediator thanks them both for voices kept even. Ethan doesn't feel pride, he feels appropriate. They move through property. Dana asks to keep the house for a year to stabilize. Ethan declines. He offers a buyout calculation instead. Appraisal minus mortgage minus repairs, adjusted for down payment and improvements already paid. A number anyone could defend aloud. The mediator writes the formula on her pad and underlines it. Rowena reads the prenup clause aloud, marital misconduct tied to commingled funds. Dana's counsel counters with context. Ethan counters with receipts, item by item. No theatrics, only consequences, where a line blurs. Ethan defers to a standard he can live with. If it plausibly served a client and proof exists, it stays off the list. If not, it returns. The room exhales an inch. The currency here is documentation, and Dana understands it. They address obligations in transition, utilities, insurance, who keeps which car. The mediator suggests a neutral joint statement. Ethan is ready with one line: "We separated, we wish each other well." A sentence that closes doors without slamming them. The digital boundaries clause gets its own page. No screenshots shared with third parties. No posts assigning blame. No logging into each other's calendars or clouds. The mediator calls it a wise fence. Dana signs with a pause that sounds like grief. Lunch arrives in paper wraps smelling faintly of dill. They eat without conversation, a civility of people who once passed salt across a table without thinking. Back in session, they finalize repayment, equal monthly installments, modest interest rate, no penalty for early closure. A quarrel becomes a plan once numbers hold it. Afternoon drags the light toward exhaustion. The mediator reads back the term sheet. Division of assets, repayment schedule, buyout formula, digital boundaries, non-disparagement, joint public sentence. "Anything else?" she asks. Ethan adds one final clause: neither party contacts the other's employer except through counsel, except as legally required. MS Ames writes it down, clicks her pen, and smiles the tired smile of work done correctly. They sign, papers shuffle. Copies slide into manila folders. Dana thanks the mediator, thanks her lawyer, thanks Ethan without quite looking at him. Outside, the street sounds unchanged, buses sighing, a bicycle bell, someone laughing into a phone. Inside Ethan, something unclenches that has been braced too long. Rowena shakes his hand. "Boring wins," she says. He almost smiles. At home, the house greets him with honest creaks. In his study, he sets his copy of the agreement beside the inward-facing silver frame. Not a trophy, a record. In his notebook, he writes one line before switching off the lamp: "We signed what we could live with." The refrigerator hums, a small machine doing its job without fanfare. Ethan listens to it like proof that life, when handled correctly, makes the right kind of noise. Consequences do not storm in with banners. They arrive like gravity, quiet, steady, unavoidable. Cole Hartman learns this the way a man learns weather, through notices, through silences, through the absence of applause. The first sign comes by email. Subject line: transition of account ownership. He loses a key client not because he forgot how to sell, but because clients don't buy risk. The note is polite to the point of absence, effective immediately. Continuity of service will not be affected. The language avoids his name even as it erases his standing. HR completes its interviews. Summaries are filed, dates, times, policy, references. No drama, no adjectives, just the handbook quoted back to itself. Cole signs acknowledgement forms with a pen that presses too hard, grooves etched into paper that no one will read twice. Rent is less polite. A 3-day notice posts to his door: pay or quit. A deadline stamped like a clock face he cannot slow. A week later, another slip arrives, bureaucratic chill wrapped in legal phrasing. No gossip here, only arithmetic. Amounts owed, dates missed, balances rising, friends thin out. Invitations skip him like stones across water, touch once, then vanish. The group chat fades to gray. Neighbors who once waved across the parking lot now fumble with keys, eyes down. Loyalty proves itself a matter of convenience. Even the gym betrays him. Under lights too honest, someone mutters he looks smaller. The mirrors agree. Swagger depends on reflection, but mirrors are literal creatures. He benches less, laughs less, watches charm shrivel under fluorescent truth. Ethan hears fragments the way one hears weather in mentions in passing. A clerk at O'Leary's says, "You hear Hartman lost that account?" A neighbor rolling up a hose says, "Management's tightening things." At Murphy's, Tommy wipes the bar and remarks almost to himself, "Some weeks a man meets his policies." None of it is victory to Ethan. It is simply the town returning to order. He does not send another packet. He doesn't need to. Gravity does the rest. One action set in motion, the fall continues on its own. Cole's apartment door tells the story better than words. Tape residue where notices once clung, an empty rectangle of space where his car used to drip oil. Departure does not trumpet itself. It leaves shadows. He exits Harbor Ridge with a single suitcase, voice stripped of its old swagger. No parade, no audience. A rideshare idles at the curb. Cole glances once at the unit number, as if wishing the numbers could reset. Then the car folds him into traffic, his taillights merging with every other stranger's. That evening, Ethan sits on his porch, watching a neighbor's boy attempt a skateboard trick again and again. 20 minutes of misses. Then suddenly a landing, wheels clack, arms flare, laughter breaks free like light through a crack. The sound reaches Ethan a breath later than the sight, and something behind his ribs loosens. He did not want Cole ruined. He wanted the math to balance. Tonight, for the first time in months, it does. Inside, the silver frame waits in the drawer, pressed against documents layered like sediment. Ethan writes one final line before bed, consequences applied, course steady. Then he lets the house speak in its honest creaks, the language he trusts most. Dana rents a studio where the refrigerator hums louder than the street outside. The place smells of cardboard and fresh paint, a scent that suggests beginnings but not celebration. A narrow window looks onto an alley lined with recycling bins. She sets a borrowed mattress on the floor, balances a lamp on a stack of books. When the switch clicks, the bulb throws a small, brave circle of light, and the rest of the room stays empty. Her courage feels brittle, more survival than triumph. The first night she eats takeout with a plastic fork and files the receipt into a folder labeled budget. Friends answer her texts with delays. Thinking of you arrives without invitations attached. Family responds with boundaries. Her mother offers Sundays for phone calls. Her father says, "We love you, but you'll need to stand up on your own feet." It is not exile, but the weather of consequence. She types a message to Ethan. "I did this." She stares at the words a long time before pressing send. His reply arrives a minute later, even and spare. "I know." She exhales, then risks a second line. "Is there anything I can do beyond the repayment plan?" His dots appear, vanish, return. Finally, tell the next person the truth the first time. She types okay and does not add a heart, a plea, or a why. She begins to build rituals from paperwork. The mediation term sheet is taped inside a cupboard. A calendar scrawled on cardboard tracks installment dates, call center shifts, reminders to cancel subscriptions she never used. The first transfer of money hovers on the banking app screen. Her finger hesitates, then taps confirm. The confirmation page looks dull, ordinary, almost bored. Arithmetic, not absolution. Nights stretch. The blank wall dares her to decorate, but she cannot yet choose a photo that doesn't lie. She writes a list on the back of an envelope. Amends. No more alibis. Own my choices. Therapy. Call Monday. Apologize to Jenny without asking her to share the blame. She tucks the envelope beneath the lamp so it is the last thing she sees before turning off the light. The studio invents its own rhythm. The fridge hum becomes a metronome for mornings. 2 sets of sheets folded into ritual. The squeak of the front door. Delivery drivers who mistake her address for 3B. She stops using late showers as erasure. Water, at last, is just water. Friends text less when gossip has no fuel. One suggests a walk, but only in daylight, only in public. Dana agrees, grateful for even cautious company. On Sunday, she calls home. Her mother talks about church flowers. Her father asks if she's eating. They avoid the words affair and Cole and speak instead of moving forward. It is not forgiveness, but it is air. One evening, she sends Ethan a photo of her payment receipt. He replies with a single word, received. No thanks, no cruelty. The word lands like a ledger note. She scrolls back to his earlier message, tell the next person the truth the first time. It sits there like a compass line. She texts Jenny next, I'm sorry, no more cover, you were right to stop. Hours pass before the reply comes, I hope you mean it. Dana types, I do, no circles, no excuses. Ethan keeps his distance without meanness, the way you guard a wound while it becomes a scar. He logs her payments in a column labeled resolved. He does not ask about her room or her routines. Once passing her block, he notices a second-hand shop near her building and imagines her buying a table sturdy enough to write on. He keeps driving. Distance is a form of care. On her third night, a squall knocks out the power. Darkness folds in, and she sits on the floor with her phone flashlight. Rain drums the alley roof. She remembers how Ethan once joked about their fragile grid, how they'd light candles and call it pioneer chic. The memory is not a knife, only a bruise. When the power clicks back, the lamp glows again, and she feels grateful for a circle of light she pays for herself. She buys 3 cheap frames at the thrift store and hangs none of them. Not yet. A pothos plant sits on the sill, leaves turning toward the alley's pale daylight. The room begins to distinguish between noise and music. The fridge hum as music, the neighbor's TV as noise, her own breath steadying as music again. On Friday, she walks past Murphy's. Through the glass, she sees Tommy laughing with someone at the bar. She keeps moving. 2 blocks later, she catches her reflection in a darkened shop window. The woman staring back looks older by months, not years. Earn your pictures, she thinks, a phrase to carry. That night, she cleans the kitchenette until it smells of lemon. She sets her single plate to dry, wipes the counter twice. Before sleep, she sends one last text to Ethan, thank you for keeping it civil. His reply is as plain as ever, it's appropriate. She nods in the dark, unseen. The fridge hums, the street whispers. The wall stays blank, waiting without accusation. Somewhere in the quiet, a map redraws itself 1 square at a time. Home does not heal itself, it waits for its owner to begin. Ethan starts with paint. The hallway first, the spine of the house. The color he chooses looks like light, not white, warmth folded inside brightness. He stirs the can, cuts careful lines along the trim. By noon, the walls stop looking tired. By evening, they catch the sun and return it softly. He fixes what he once ignored. A cabinet hinge that squealed for months surrenders after 2 turns of a screwdriver. A vent rattling in the bedroom is replaced with one that lies flush and quiet. Small tasks, but the sound of rooms changes when they stop protesting. On the refrigerator, he tapes a chore chart. It is less about chores than presence. Monday, floors. Tuesday, trash and inbox. Wednesday, call insurance. Thursday, run. Friday, water plants and cook something good. The squares are not obligations, they are handholds. In the evening, he opens windows and lets Harbor Ridge drift in. A dog barks 2 streets over. A bicycle bell rings twice, then fades. Someone passes under a streetlight, laughing into a phone. The house breathes again, lemon cleaner mixing with salt air. The silver frame stands upright on his desk. Its backing holds nothing but a clean white card. For now, the emptiness is not absence but pause. One day he will choose a new photograph. Today, the space is allowed to remain open. He begins running small loops along the waterfront. The first mile scrapes his lungs raw. By the second week, he adds a block. He passes the bait shop where gulls argue like customers in line. He nods to the woman who walks 3 tiny dogs in perfect choreography. He waves to the neighbor boy whose skateboard now lands more often than not. Progress comes in quiet increments. Inside, the after list gathers check marks. Passwords done, pantry organized, paint chosen and applied, mail sorted the day it arrives, takeout menus trimmed to the few he actually uses. The drawer once full of clutter now closes clean. Dinner becomes ritual instead of filler. Vegetables sautéed, rice steady, fish bronzed at the edges. Basil clipped fresh from the window pot. He eats at the table with the window open, breeze across his arms, fork resting mid-bite as if the pause itself has weight. He washes the plate right after, leaving the sink empty. When Dana texts a screenshot of her second repayment receipt, Ethan logs it calmly. He replies with a single word, received. No anger, no warmth, just acknowledgement, distance held steady like a fence that guards both sides. On the bookshelf, he finds postcards once tucked in novels. He pins one of a lighthouse to the desk, lines sketched simple, waves hand-drawn in motion. He writes a note to his sister, drops it in the mail. Not everything must exist on a screen. The hallway paint dries to the color he hoped, a shade that makes morning earlier. He hangs nothing yet. Walls are allowed to be walls, unburdened. He walks through rooms that no longer hold their breath, and each creak feels honest. Saturday, he oils the hinges on the front door. A neighbor stops to trade a ladder for a sander, both men calling the exchange square. The skateboard boy asks if he can practice on Ethan's driveway. Ethan says yes and sits on the porch with a glass of water, clapping once when the trick lands. He is no hero, but no longer a dupe. He is a man with clean hands and orderly files, and that turns out to be enough. Enough to sleep, enough to cook, enough to sign only what matters, enough to keep running one block further, enough to open another window and leave the frame empty by choice. That night, music drifts from a backyard 2 streets over. Ethan stands in the hallway, hand brushing the doorframe the way his father once did, a small gesture of ownership. In his study, the white card inside the frame turns gray as the lamp clicks off. In his notebook, he writes one line before bed: build small, build steady, build in plain sight. The night air moves through the house like a pulse, rooms honest, windows open, a life slowly taking shape where it is meant to. The decree arrives in an envelope that looks like any other, thin, pale, unremarkable. No red stamp, no bold header. Just folded paper carrying the end of a marriage. Ethan signs where Rowena Pike points, her voice calm in the way of someone whose routine task reshapes another person's world. The scratch of his pen feels louder than the entire room. The folder closes with a soft click, a sound small enough to mark a life dividing. Stepping outside, the air tastes different. Not lighter, not sweeter. Simply unburdened. He drives without direction until the road bends toward the overlook at the edge of Harbor Ridge. The sky burns gold above the ocean, the horizon steady in its indifference. Ethan leans against the hood, lungs working freely for the first time in months. He stays longer than he means to, letting the wind press against him, letting silence feel like something earned. Memories arrive not as knives, but as echoes, vows spoken under church sunlight, dinners eaten in silence while she claimed late meetings, notebooks filled with receipts instead of plans. He does not imagine Dana ruined forever, nor Cole punished without end. He imagines only himself, ordinary, honest, unperformed. That feels like the grandest upgrade of all. On the drive back, he stops at Murphy's, not for beer, not for spectacle, for the sound of Tommy wiping down glasses, for the noise of Harbor Ridge going about its life. He orders coffee black, sits among the jukebox laughter and quiet arguments about baseball scores. Life in motion, and this time he feels in step with it. He texts his sister a photo of the sky, captioned with 3 words, "I'm all right." The reply arrives quick, a heart. He doesn't need it, but it warms him anyway. Back home, the house greets him not as a vault of suspicion, but as a place with potential. He places the decree in the drawer beside the silver frame, its clean white card still waiting inside. Then he opens his notebook, the one labeled after, and writes 3 lines. Sleep came easy. Groceries tomorrow, fresh herbs. Frame still empty, but ready. He lingers on that last word. Ready, not because he intends to fill the frame tomorrow or the day after, but because the emptiness is no longer wound. It is space waiting. He washes the dinner plate, dries it, sets it down clean, opens the window. Night air drifts in, carrying the bark of a neighbor's dog, the ring of bicycle chains, the muffled laughter of someone walking home. Ethan stands there, feeling the ordinary night settle around him. Revenge has never been the point. The collapse of Dana's lies, the exile of Cole's swagger, those were chapters, not conclusions. The lasting act is simpler. He chooses himself and discovers that is enough. And that brings us to the end of the silver frame, Her betrayal, my calculated revenge. In the end, betrayal never goes unpaid. It collects its debt in silence, in consequences, and in the life that moves forward without lies. But here's the question I leave with you. If you were in Ethan's place, would you have chosen patience or confrontation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Cheating Stories 7. More gripping tales of betrayal and revenge are on their way, and you won't want to miss them.